And we are live. Welcome, welcome, welcome to A Mighty Mystery on A Mighty Blaze. I am Hank Phillippi Ryan. I am here on Thursday. Nope, this is Tuesday. I know what day it is. Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET to bring you A Mighty Mystery as always. And today we are so thrilled to welcome Riley Sager, who will talk to us today about Survive the Night, a noir, marvelous, wonderful, chilling, twisty thriller that you do not want to miss. And we are giving away a copy of Survive the Night this afternoon. So be sure to leave a comment or a question for Riley in the chat, and we will ask your question and we will look at your comments and we will draw one winner at the end of this live broadcast to win Survive the Night by Riley Sager. Quickly, I am Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 13 going on 14 thrillers. My new one, Her Perfect Life, so casually displayed behind me, just got starred reviews from Kirkus and Publishers Weekly, so I'm thrilled about that. If you are new to A Mighty Blaze, welcome, welcome, welcome. You have picked a fantastic day to join us. Quickly, if you don't know about A Mighty Blaze is a sort of consortium of 37 or so volunteers, and it was started more than a year ago by the wildly powerhouse team of Jenna Blum and Caroline Lovett to sort of bring us all together in the pandemic, make sure we were still reading and talking about books and learning about new books and meeting new authors and bringing us all together. And indeed, it has been blazing now for more than a year. It's here on Facebook and on YouTube, where it's sort of a network of writerly shows where you can learn about fiction and nonfiction and poetry and all things writerly. So we welcome you here today. Again, we welcome today Riley Sager and his wonderful Survive the Night. Welcome, Riley. I'm going to take 10 more seconds of yammering to introduce you properly. I know this is the beginning of all these shows, right? The host talks and talks and talks and talks and talks, and the audience is saying, we want to hear Riley Sager. Okay.
Well, you do that and I'll do.
Oh, okay, perfect. I love this. I'm taking a picture of this right now. Okay. Riley Sager is the pseudonym of a former journalist, editor, and graphic designer. His real name is Ernest Hemingway. So he writes under, right? Is that not true? So you had to change it.
I had to.
Now a full-time writer, Riley is the author of Final Girls. You know this book, you all, an international bestseller that's been published in 25 languages, and the instant New York Times bestsellers, The Last Time I Lied, Lock Every Door, and Home Before Dark. His latest, Survive the Night, is now available, and he is a native of Pennsylvania who lives in Princeton, New Jersey. Yes, and hold up the book because we're going to say one more time, we're doing a fabulous giveaway of Survive the Night, so you do not want to miss this book. Welcome, Riley. Finally, I'm going to let you talk.
Hello.
So much buzz about this book. It is on every best of the year list. It's amazing. How does that feel?
It feels very surreal, very cool that something I created in this room during a pandemic has, gotten so much attention and gotten so much buzz. And my publisher would really be remiss if I didn't say that this is also a New York Times bestseller. So that was amazing to see that when the day that happened. And it's been great.
Well, tell me about that day, the day that you get the call, and it can't possibly be old hat after all this time, the day that you get the call that your book has made the New York Times list. Who calls you and what do they say?
It is my editor, and a lot of times it's really just, it's when you get a sense, like you can see sort of like some sales figures and you can sense that this might have a chance at making that wonderful, much highly wanted list. And so then it's just sort of like a waiting game the day it's released. And, like last year, my editor was in a meeting when the list was released. So she was like texting me during this meeting, like, oh my God, you made the list again. And so this year I was actually on a phone call with her about something else. And we were about to end the call. And we were like, we might as well just chat for 5 minutes until the list comes out. And in case there's good news. And yeah, and it was wonderful news.
That is the ultimate in suspense because somebody knows it and they're about to tell you, and you know that it's about to happen and it's going to be really, really great, or everybody's going to start rationalizing about how well it's that time of year and a lot of big books came out and you can't really predict what people will do. But that is suspense, isn't it? That, I mean, you are so wonderful at suspense, and that's the essence of it.
Yeah, but I really, I'm good at writing suspense. I hate experiencing suspense. And so it is such a tense day because you wake up and you're like, it doesn't matter if I don't, it doesn't matter because it doesn't really. I mean, it's a lovely feather in your cap and it boosts sales, but like the book is good whether it makes a list or not.
So
And
these are what writers say to each other. This is what we say to
and
ourselves.
it's because, but it's true. Yeah, it is. And so it's like, it doesn't matter. But then like, as the clock ticks closer that day, I start getting like, okay, now I'm a little nervous. Now, what if it doesn't? What if it does? What if it's, and it just is this weird, suspenseful afternoon, and you just try to block it out, but you can't block it out. It's that elephant in the room that you can't ignore.
But it's so Hitchcockian, really, because you know that something is going to happen, and it's going to be really good or really bad, and it's not going to happen until it happens, and there's nothing you can do, and you've done everything that you possibly can. So I don't mean to push you about suspense, and I don't mean to go on about it, but this is why people read your books, isn't it? Because something is happening and something is about to happen, and the characters may not know it, but we know it because it wouldn't be a book if it weren't going to happen. Elizabeth Lamson is saying, love all your books, Riley. We do
Thank
love
you.
everyone. Bozena is here, wonderful, and Elizabeth and Darlene coming, and then Marjorie is here from Finland. So
wow.
Lovely. Make sure you tell us where you're from, you all, in the comments and in the chat. We would love to welcome you all to A Mighty Blaze, where we're talking with Riley Sager about his wonderful Survive the Night. So let's not keep people in suspense any longer. This book, well, that is the hard part about talking about suspense, because I can't tell you what it's about. But let me say that it stars college girl Charlie Jordan. She's movie obsessed. And after the murder of her best friend by a suspected serial killer, she drops out of college and decides to hitch a ride home. So that is a dumb idea, first off.
Very dumb. Very, very dumb. Yes.
You tell. So how much more can you tell us just about the plot of this?
Well, yeah. So she's going through a horrible time. She's in mourning. She's guilt stricken, and she just needs to leave school and get home. And that involves a drive from the campus in New Jersey to her home in Ohio. And it takes place in 1991, which is important because back in the 90s, I don't know how it is today, but I went to college in the 90s and there was this thing called the ride board. Mm-hmm. And if you did not have a car and you needed to get somewhere, you would post on the ride board looking for a ride to Ohio. And a complete stranger would put your phone number on there, of course. And so complete strangers would say, like, I'm going to Ohio. Do you need a ride? There's space for one more. And it was just basically like campus sanctioned hitchhiking.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, like today, it's just such a bizarre idea. Like, do not get in a car with a stranger. But in the 90s on college campuses all across the country, this was how people got home in a lot of cases. So Charlie goes to the ride board and she meets a fellow student named Josh, who says, I'm also going to Ohio. Do you want to split the ride with me? And she says, yes. And really, 5 minutes into that drive, Charlie starts to suspect that maybe not all is right with Josh and that he might be hiding some things and that he, in fact, might be the serial killer who killed her best friend.
Well, that's a situation. That is the situation. And you write it so gorgeously with so much foreshadowing, so much careful foreshadowing that, every reader is saying, don't get in the car, don't get in the car. But she's not stupid. I mean, she has a good reason why she needs to go. I mean, your characters do what they think is right. So talk a little bit about that, the difference between a character who we love, like Charlie, who does something that we, as her mom and best friend would say not to, but there's a reason for it.
Yeah, there's so much. Charlie's such a complex character, and she just sometimes makes mystifying decisions for someone else. but to her, a lot of times, her decisions make sense in the moment. And there are reasons for why she needs to leave. There are reasons for why she does what she does. And this is where it gets hard to talk about the book, because sometimes like they're not revealed until like literally the end of the book. And so there's a lot of behavior going on where it can be a bit confounding. Like, why is she doing this? And there is a reason why what's happening is happening in the book. And so it's a very difficult book to talk about because there is the potential for lots of spoilers and things like that.
We will tread very carefully with this. And the book is so riveting. I remember I was reading the back cover, and Lisa Scottolini says, I couldn't put down Survive the Night, and I didn't want to try. I mean, that's how I felt about it too. I was absolutely racing through it. And Charlie's journey is so interesting. I mean, the title Survive the Night is so perfect because that's literally all she has to do.
That's her sole job for that day, is like survive the night. Yes.
Was that always the title?
Oh gosh, no. The titles sometimes are so easy to me, and then other times my editor and I like just go through like 100 different options. And this was one of those 100 different options where we just couldn't think of a title that best expressed what we wanted the vibe to be for the book. And finally, after so much just wrangling and just putting words together, I was like, just survive the night. It's so simple, but it's so effective. Survive the night. And after that, we found out that it has been used before, but it was one of those cases where we're like, okay, this book is different enough, and it's a perfect title for this book. And so we went with it. So
it's a perfect title for this book. And don't forget, you all, we're giving away a copy of the perfectly titled Survive the Night. It's a movie too. And so that's sort of multi-layered too, since movies infuse this book throughout. Charlie is a film major and loves movies. And I know you love movies too.
I do.
So you got to kind of revel in the moviness of this. And parenthetically, I love movies as well. And all of the allusions that you have in the book to great movies was so much fun to read and think, oh, I know that movie. Oh, I know that movie. I've seen that movie. Tell us a little bit about what it was like to weave your love for movies and Charlie's crazy obsession with movies into this book.
Yeah, it's very interesting because when I started writing the book, one of the first things you think of with this plot is, how do I keep her in the car? How do I keep this character in this car with this man who she doesn't trust for long time? And it occurred to me that, maybe one of the reasons she stays in the car is because she doesn't quite trust herself. And I already had in mind, like, I'm going to make Charlie a film studies major for several reasons. One, I happened to have been a film studies major when I was in college in the 90s. And so it saves on research. And I knew I could put in a lot of fun movie references. But then I also started thinking, okay, let's make it really part of her character. And so this is where she calls them the movies in her mind. And so it's a psychosis, basically. Like she calls them movies in her mind, but they're really hallucinations.
I mean, her doctor calls them hallucinations, and you talk about that. You talk about that very early on in the book. So this is not a spoiler.
Yes, this is not a spoiler. Charlie has had a rough life, and so one of her defense mechanisms is to envision the events around her as not life, but a movie, and it helps her deal with it. And so she has what she calls the movies in her mind, where sometimes she'll just like fall into like a daydream-like state and sort of picture the events as a movie happening, unspooling in front of her. And that's all well and good, except when you are in a car with a man you think might be a killer. And so these movies in her mind start happening, and Charlie can't trust sometimes what's real and what's not.
I mean,
And
and we've all done this. I mean, I'm saying this now and I'm hoping we have all done this. I mean, you look at a situation and you think, what would I do? I would go into the burning building. I would get the guy. I would be the hero. I would save him. This has nothing to do with the book, but we can spin stories. All of us are readers and writers, and we can spin stories of what might happen. And so her imagination is just very vivid and happens to be connected with movies. Sylvia in the chat is asking, how did you choose which movies to reference? How did that happen? Did you pick the movie and put it in? Or did you have her think something and think, oh, that's just like All About Eve?
Yeah, it was a fun little game to play. Like, I didn't have specific movies that I wanted to mention. They came up organically because she thinks in terms of movie knowledge and movie trivia. And, part of when she's in this car with this stranger, she thinks, okay, what would this character do in this movie? Or this reminds me of this movie. And let's think about what happened in that. And so it was a matter of people were familiar with, because I didn't want to go very obscure. I didn't want people to be like, what is this French film from the 1960s that I've never heard of? Like, I wanted it to be relatable because that would make Charlie relatable.
And also it's 1991 though. So the movie, her heroines and her heroes in 1991 are of that time and earlier because she's a film buff. And did you do a lot of specific research about what movies she would be seeing?
No, that was all up here.
Really?
that was the benefit of being a film studies major, is you have a lot of cinematic knowledge at your disposal. And I knew like what kind of characters that she would sort of look up to. And 1991, this is another reason why I chose that year, was an incredible year for movies. And it was an incredible year for strong female characters at the movies. So you had Clarice Starling in The Silence of the Lambs, and you had Thelma and Louise, and Sarah Connor from Terminator 2. And so there were all these references of movies that she had just seen recently in the theaters that she would, be able to draw upon and reference.
And think about it, because those women that you mentioned, I just got goosebumps when you said that, because those are all smart, brave women who take some risks. I mean, those women are not holding back in any way, and they're going after what they want, and they think they can succeed. They have a mindset of success by using their own wit and their own intelligence and their own knowledge. So I'm just about to ask you, is that what went through Charlie's mind? I mean, you're Charlie's mind. So talk a little bit about that, about how that then influences what she does.
Well, I love writing characters who are underestimated, and they even underestimate themselves. And that through the course of the events of the book, they have to discover this inner strength that they did not realize they possessed. And so that was part of the process of writing Charlie, is, just sort of gradually making her stronger and more resilient and more forceful as the book goes on, and drawing on these movie characters that she's seen and loved, like Clarice Starling and Thelma Louise. And it's a really fun journey that she takes of just sort of discovering how powerful she really is.
And I love the way you did this. The structure of the book is gorgeous, and the way you introduce us to Charlie's brain through movies, which are very familiar to us, works so beautifully. Sylvia is saying, this is when I look over here, you all, I'm looking at the comments, I'm not looking away from Riley, says this is every college parent's nightmare. I read somewhere, which is true. I mean, you were talking about the ride board. I went to college in the 70s, and we just flat out hitchhiked. There was no ride board. We just hitchhiked. And when I think about that now, when I hitchhiked from Oxford, Ohio to Cincinnati, I think, if I were my mom, if my mom ever knew that I had done that. But I was a college kid. And everything was going to be fine. Yeah. So, but again, I read that somewhere that you said in this book, because it takes place over this one night. Um, I thought it would, I'm going to read your quote here. I thought it would be neat to get into a car and drive really fast in the book. And
Yes.
such a great quote because that is what it's like. You're in this car and you are on the road. And from New Jersey to Ohio is a long, creepy way.
Yes, and on Interstate 80, which I know very, very, very well because I grew up in Pennsylvania and my parents still live there. So to get from New Jersey to Pennsylvania, just hop on Interstate 80 and drive. And so I knew, like, okay, I have to be on that highway because I know it so well and I know which parts are creepy and I know which parts are isolated. And yeah, it was all just really a change of pace for me because my previous book, Home Before Dark, it was two books in one. It was like past and present combining, and it was so complex. And I just wanted to go really simple with my next book. And there's really nothing more simple than putting two characters in a car and just set them off on an empty highway in the dead of night and see what happens.
Yeah, Riley, but you say it's simple, and it is simple in a way, but it's also extremely difficult. It is quite a juggle to write a single point of view in such a closed, confined environment in just that amount of time where there's going to be a lot of talking. And you have to keep the reader absolutely, as you did, you kept the reader of Survive the Night. I'll show it again, Survive the Night, absolutely riveted to the page. But you set up I think it's difficult. I think that would be difficult to do. And you used all kinds of methods like playing 20 questions and stopping at a diner and all those kinds of things to make there be episodes along the way. What I know you said it was easy, but I can't believe that. I must say, what were the challenges of that?
The challenge was, well, one, the first was, keeping her in the car.
Yeah.
And two, trying to make it as suspenseful and interesting as possible. And so I really did look at it almost as a two-character play.
Mm-hmm.
For a large part of the book, it is two people in a car talking. And she suspects him, and then he suspects her of suspecting him, and there are mind games going on, and lies being told, but also they're revealing parts of themselves, and quite unintentionally. And I really went back in the revising process and just looked at every bit of dialogue between the two of them and treated it like it was a two-character play. Like every line has to have something important going on here.
That's such the essence of it. And I think I'm going to write that down. Valerie is saying two characters in a car, like a closed room novel, like a locked room mystery. And not that someone is murdered it's not like a locked room mystery in that somebody killed someone and somebody's guilty, but who can we trust? Who's telling the truth? Who, if anyone, is reliable? And what are we, the reader, supposed to believe? Was that dialogue fun to write? I mean, it's all so multi-layered.
It was a lot of fun to write, because there's so much going on. Like the character will say something but mean something else, and like you brought up, there is a game of 20 questions, which, I mean, I don't want to boast too much, but I suspect it's probably the most suspenseful game of 20 questions ever played in a book. And it was a lot of fun to just really kind of, okay, is this suspenseful enough? No, I want to ratchet up the tension just a little bit more. And so I'm going to have them do this. And then I also try to leave room for fun. Like there's a portion of the book where they are guessing the movie that a certain quote is from. And that was fun to pick the movies. Like, hey, I'm going to use this quote because it sounds harmless, but
yes,
it might reveal a little bit about his character. And that was just so much fun to come up with.
And when you're in the midst of reading Survive the Night, it's just so twisty and it gets darker and darker and darker. Even though it's fun to guess the movie, and it's fun to play 20 questions. I mean, I guess the point is, but the answers are, also just as easily. But it's so noirish. It's so almost horror movie. The noir influences in this book are incredible. You know, the bleakness and the indecision, and someone trying to do the right thing, and someone hovering over them, and the darkness and the confinement and all those things. Are you a noir fan?
I am. I'm very much a noir fan, and the original idea, like, I don't know, when you get an idea, is it fully formed or is it just a snippet of an idea? Because for me, with Survive the Night, it literally just popped into my head one day. Film noir, Little Red Riding Hood.
Oh, really? That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
and I don't know what it. How I didn't know, like, what is this? What is it gonna mean? And so I thought about it. I'm like, okay, yeah, there's a girl. She's trying to get home, and in the book's case, literally to her grandmother's house.
Oh, right.
And she's even wearing a red coat, which some people pick up on that and some people don't. And she's just trying to get home to grandmother's house, and she encounters the big bad wolf, and she gets in the car. And because there's it's such a wonderful noir staple, is these two people in a car driving in the middle of the night.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always a man and a woman, and they don't trust each other. And so I just wanted to explore that more and just see where it took me.
I mean, you can just imagine. I mean, you're in the car when you're reading Survive the Night. You are in the car. You can see the headlights through the gloom and the trees and the endless road ahead. And there's no one that's going to help you, and there's no place to go. But then from time to time, there's a neon sign, and it's just as visual as it possibly can be. You know, I teach a lot of writing classes, and I tell my students, such as they are, I tell my students, you should write the book as cinematically as you can. So the movie of the book is unfolding in your head as you're writing it. And you
Yeah.
must think of that every day.
I mean, a book is a movie in your mind, in a way, yes. And I love creating that atmosphere, and I love giving the details that just maybe bring a little bit more dread and suspense and just flavor to the narrative.
Really, it's true. I mean, did you ever think that majoring in film studies would lead you to be a best-selling author of a book about someone who's majoring in film studies? That's as meta as it gets.
No, but I did take the greatest class I ever took was called Film and Literature. And when I signed up for it, I thought it was going to be, oh, we will read the book and then we'll watch the movie and we'll compare them. And won't that be an easy A? And it turned out to be no, it was about narrative.
Oh.
And so we looked at books and short stories and plays, and we looked at movies, and we broke down, how is the story being told? Who's telling it? Why is it told this way? And it just unlocked this whole creative part in my head where I don't think I'd be the writer I am today without that one class, because I learned just so much valuable, wonderful information about what is the best way to tell a story. And it differs for each different story. And it was this mind-opening class.
Because, you know, when you're talking about point of view, whose story are you telling, and through whose brain and mind and eyes are you telling the story? And you go so deeply into Charlie that we become Charlie in the car, and we learn to understand how she thinks. If you had told it in a different way, it would be a completely different story. That narrative class is we're running out of time, but I need to ask you this. The idea that the class on narrative and comparing films and books like that, what was the essence of that? What do you take from that you think about as you're writing?
Well, that it's okay to take narrative risks, and it's okay to go outside the box, and that some stories need to be told in a certain way. And like, one of the movies we looked at was Sunset Boulevard, which is it's narrated by a dead man. And like, the opening scene is we see him dead in the pool, and then we go back and figure out what happened. And so I think the hardest part about writing is figuring out what is the best way to tell this particular story you want to tell. And sometimes it's not the original way you start off with, and sometimes revising is necessary. But once you find out the proper narrative course, it can be so much fun.
Do you get chills when you figure it out, when you hear Charlie's voice and you think, oh, here's my Little Red Riding Hood. Here's my
Yes.
vulnerable young. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's amazing to, it sounds all weird and like metaphysical, but like sometimes I hear the character's voice in my head. And it's not my voice, it's a complete stranger's voice that I can hear in my head. And when that clicks and it happens, then I can just write like the wind. And it's such a strange, and I can't explain it. I mean, I think it's similar to acting, maybe. It's my brain acting and coming up with a character. But it's really until I can hear that person that is when it finally starts to take off.
And you can't make it happen. That's the thing. You just have to have your mind be open to the moment where that character fills you. I mean, I know sometimes I think of it as method acting when I'm writing, and I become a character, and I can feel that my posture is even different. If I'm writing somebody has good posture and is, sort of prissy and careful, or the one who's a little bit sinister is going to write a little bit. My body is different when I'm writing them. So, and I agree with you about the moment when the story hits. Do you remember? Golly, do you remember the first movie you saw that made a difference to you? Was there a memorable trip to the movies?
I don't know. I mean, I remember, like, I'm pretty sure my first movie that I can remember was 101 Dalmatians. And I think I was probably like 5 or 6 or something when that happened. But I have so many fond memories, but they're all more like just sort of personal things. Like I remember being a kid and being allowed to stay up past like 10 p.m. for the first time ever to watch Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
Because it was the first time it was ever on TV. And so my parents were like, okay, you can stay up to watch this. And it just was this magical moment that like, I'm watching this. And it helps that the movie's a masterpiece and I love it so much.
I love Mary Poppins.
There's so many things like that.
I mean, I remember when the first time we watched Wizard of Oz on TV, sitting on the floor of our living room. And my mom knew what happened with the color in the movie, but she didn't tell me. And so it's black and white at the beginning. I don't want to spoil Wizard of Oz for anyone, but you've all seen it.
Everyone knows this, or they should if they don't.
Okay, right, exactly. If this is a spoiler for you, where have you been? So the beginning of the movie is black and white, and beautifully black and white. Over the Rainbow is black and white, and then when she gets to Oz, it opens the door and it's color. And I gasped. I think I actually almost burst into tears when that happened. And you can really be so transported by movies. I was a really geeky kid, so all I did was read and watch old movies on TV. All I did, and served me well.
Same here.
Really,
same here.
That's so great. I mean, it does also connect you to other people. If I say Justin Sturges, or did you see The Lady Eve, or did you see, pick a movie? It's you can talk about that with someone and get a connection about that with someone, and then go more deeply into how you feel about the universe. If you connect over Betty Davis, or if you connect over the Flying Monkeys, whatever it is.
Yeah. And movies are a universal language, and they're very much an American product. Like there are foreign films, and there are many amazing foreign films, but like, I think like America's biggest export might be movies. And it's something that you can instantly bond with someone. So you can meet someone for the first time, like in Japan, and talk about the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
And that's such a unifying thing. And that was another reason why I did want to make movies. Such a part of this book. I did want people to relate to Charlie and like Charlie. And I knew that if Charlie made a reference to Jaws or The Wizard of Oz or something like that, that the reader would feel the same, be like, oh, I get her. I
Yes,
like her.
definitely so. I have to tell you a really quick story, you all, that I met Hallie Efron a million years ago. I mean, 12 years ago. And we were talking about something, and I said to her, just sort of offhandedly, do you know the movie Desk Set? That's my favorite movie, Desk Set. I just love that movie. And she looked at me and she said, my parents wrote that movie. And
That
we
is crazy.
isn't it crazy? And we have been friends since that moment. So movies do have a power. We are so over time. I can't even begin to tell you, Wiley. I'm going to take people's questions in the
Sure,
audience
let's do it.
for a minute. But before we do that, I need to ask you, your fabulous book, Survive the Night, for which there's about 5 more minutes for you all to enter your comments in the chat to win a copy of Riley's book. You've been doing a lot of, you've been on Facebook and on Instagram and on Twitter and every place for, and every interview and every bookstore for this book. And you've also interviewed other people. And I
Yes.
need to ask you to tell us about the Muppet Question.
Oh my gosh. Oh, yeah. And if this is the only thing I'm known for, I will be happy. No, I had the pleasure of talking to Zakiya Harris, who wrote The Other Black Girl, and this was like 2 or 3 days after her book came out, and that book was, speaking of having a book everywhere, that book was everywhere, and she had been been profiled in the New York Times, and she was on Good Morning America, and she was everywhere, and I was worried about, what am I going to ask her? Because she's been asked literally everything under the sun, probably a dozen times for the past month. So I wanted to come up with at least one question that I knew without a doubt that she had never been asked before. And so that was, who is your favorite Muppet?
So great.
Because everyone loves the Muppets, and I'm sure everyone has a favorite. And so it just, and it kind of is now getting like a life of its own. I've asked others. I've asked Megan Miranda and Brad Parks about their favorite Muppets, and I plan on continuing to do it. Yeah.
You get the Muppet Question. You get the Muppet Question. I won't ask you because I know you want to keep that secret, and you can ask me when you interview me someday. And I know everybody in the audience. I've been thinking about it ever since. I'm not quite sure I have my answer yet. It's a toughie, really a toughie.
It changes.
Doesn't it? It totally changes. So that is so marvelous. I know when I did a panel at BoucherCon of all the guests of honor, the same situation. It was a Sunday morning, and they'd all been interviewed like crazy for the whole week. And I needed to think of a question that none of them had ever been asked before. So I said, I'm going to ask you a question that you've never been asked before, I hope, and that is, and I paused, and they were all looking at me, and I said, what is the capital of Belize? And there's complete silence in the room. So I'll get the Belize question, you get the Muppet Question, and now we will take quickly, if you have some time,
yes,
the audience questions about Survive the Night. What questions do we have? How does Riley, ask Darlene, welcome. How does Riley get his characters' names? That's a good question about this book specifically. Family, friends, enemies, baby books, what?
It depends on the book. It depends on the character. I have been known in the past to name some unlikable characters after some people I might not like very much. But in the case of Survive the Night, Charlie, I got her name because it's the same name as a character in a wonderful, wonderful Alfred Hitchcock movie called Shadow of a Doubt. And the character is named Charlie, and she is named after her uncle, Charlie, who is a serial killer, and she suspects that her uncle's a serial killer. And it's just this wonderful movie. And I just knew that my Charlie had to have like that name, and it allowed for some wonderful comparisons. Like, she compares herself to the movie Charlie, and she thinks like, okay, what would movie Charlie do in this situation? Because I don't know what to do with this situation. And I just thought it was a wonderful name for this particular character.
It's very, very meta. And also the idea of how funny it is that she is comparing herself to a girl who may be the niece of a serial killer. I mean, that's a rickety platform to
yes.
start with. And so you have named people after But sometimes do the names just emerge? That's just what their name is?
Sometimes they just emerge, and sometimes I go through different names, like something. I do a lot of placeholder names where it's like, oh, this person is Bob, knowing it's not going to be Bob, and then I just need to come up with like what's a better. And sometimes it's just like the way it sounds.
Yes, I agree.
Like Josh in Survive the Night. Like it just seemed like a good name for Josh.
Yeah.
Where it's kind of bland and it's kind of innocent, but it could also be kind of, it was a good blank slate name for a character who might not be all that wonderful.
Exactly, but it could be wonderful. You just don't know. And I think that's one of them. Sue Grafton used to call the magic of books. If you get the right name, then the person behaves the way they should behave. I did that once I called somebody just as a placeholder Guy, and then the guy said, and then it turned out to be that was his name. It just stuck. His name was Guy.
If it works, it works. Yeah.
Bozania is saying, how do you feel about writing female characters? And that's a really good question. How do you feel about that? I mean, it's just a person, right?
Yeah, that's how I see it. I mean, I've had a reputation, and I like having that reputation. And
cut out a tiny
because as I said earlier,
you cut out a tiny bit, and I think
oh gosh, I'm sorry.
It was the essence of what you were saying. You said, I have a reputation for being then you froze, and that was suspense. So
for writing strong female characters, and it's nice to have that reputation. As I said earlier, I love writing about underestimated people. Mm-hmm. And I think women are very often and very unwisely underestimated. And that's a very fascinating, exciting thing to write about, is someone learning that, okay, maybe I've underestimated myself and they've definitely underestimated me. And how am I going to proceed going forward? And so it's just much more interesting than writing someone who just swaggers into the book completely self-assured, knowing what to do in any given situation. And that's really all the thought I give into it. I don't think in terms of gender. I don't think, what is this woman going to do in this situation? I think, what is this particular person going to do?
And what do they want, and how far will they go to get it? It's just about what they want and how they see the world. I mean, it's funny. Sylvia is asking a super meta question, which is, who do you envision playing these roles on film? And have you envisioned this being a film? Because I can just imagine the audience at the end just standing and giving you a standing ovation at the end of this movie, and that would happen. Do you see people?
Yes. I can. They're kind of. She's not very well known of an actress. Her name is Caitlin Dever. She was in Booksmart. She was in, and I can't think of something else. But she's such a fine, wonderful young actress, and I think she'd be amazing as Charlie.
So maybe she's watching this. Maybe she'll call.
Maybe she is. Hi, call me.
Does anybody
else? Rights are still available.
I like it. I mean, I have to tell you, Riley, this would be an unbelievably good movie, and I hope that we get to see it, and I hope that all of you here today will run right out. I mean, in 30 seconds, run right out and buy Survive the Night if you haven't read it yet. It is one of the best books of the year. I applaud you. I adore it. I thank you all for being here this afternoon. Quickly, let me say before we say goodbye to Riley, next Tuesday, I know what day it is, next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET, we will talk to Jonathan Santlofer about his thriller, The Last Mona Lisa. By the
way, I cannot wait to read that book. So excited for this book.
I am too. I totally am too. About the heist of the Mona Lisa in 1911, and then about present day art theft. Again, about greed and desire for possessions and how far people will go to get what they want. So Riley, you come back and join us to talk to Jonathan. You come ask questions as well.
Yes, I will.
And meanwhile, everyone, all of you, run out right now to an independent bookstore and snap up Survive the Night by Riley Sager. Riley, you are a rock star. Thank you so much for sharing this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Terrific. And we will see you all soon. Thank you all for coming.
Bye, everyone.